How Jung Changed My Life. Viewer Stories. The Power of Transformation. Have you ever had a moment where everything you thought you knew about yourself suddenly shifted? Where a single insight cracked open your entire understanding of who you are and why you do the things you do? Over the past few months, I've received hundreds of messages from viewers sharing how Carl Jung's teachings have transformed their lives. These aren't just intellectual breakthroughs. These are deep, soul-level transformations that have changed the trajectory of entire lives. Today, I want to share 3 of the most powerful stories with you. Stories that reveal how Jung's insights about the shadow, individuation, and the integration of opposites can literally reshape your reality. But before we dive in, I need you to ask yourself something. What part of your life feels stuck right now? What pattern keeps repeating that you can't seem to break free from? Because Jung believed that our greatest suffering comes from living unconsciously, from being driven by forces within us that we don't understand. He once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." The people whose stories we are about to explore discovered that what they thought was fate was actually choice. And that realization changed everything. Jung's approach to psychology wasn't just about understanding the mind. It was about achieving what he called individuation. This is the process of integrating all aspects of ourselves, including the parts we'd rather ignore, to become whole, authentic human beings. The 3 stories we are exploring today show this process in action. They reveal how confronting our shadow, answering the call to become who we truly are, and integrating our contradictions can lead to the kind of transformation that seems almost miraculous from the outside, but is actually the natural result of psychological honesty and courage. So settle in, because these stories might just hold the key to your own transformation. Sarah's shadow work journey. The first story comes from Sarah, a 34-year-old marketing executive who wrote to me about what she calls her shadow awakening. For years, Sarah had built her identity around being the nice girl. She was always agreeable, always accommodating, always putting others' needs before her own. On the surface, her life looked perfect: successful career, loving relationships, the admiration of everyone around her. But underneath, Sarah was dying inside. "I felt like I was wearing a mask all the time," she wrote. "I was so focused on being what everyone wanted me to be that I had no idea who I actually was. I was exhausted from constantly performing, but I didn't know how to stop." Then Sarah discovered Jung's concept of the shadow, those aspects of our personality that we repress or deny because they don't fit our idealized self-image. Jung understood that we all have a shadow. It's not evil or bad. It's simply the collection of traits, impulses, and potentials that we've pushed into the unconscious because they threaten our persona, the mask we show the world. For Sarah, her shadow contained all the parts of herself she'd learned were unacceptable. Her anger, her selfishness, her fierce independence, her willingness to say no. "I started doing what Jung called shadow work," Sarah explained. "I began paying attention to what triggered me in other people." Jung said that what we hate in others is often what we've rejected in ourselves. Sarah noticed she felt intense irritation toward colleagues who were direct and assertive. She judged friends who prioritized their own needs. These reactions were her shadow trying to get her attention. "I realized I wasn't just nice. I was terrified of my own power. I had convinced myself that being agreeable was virtuous, but really, I was just afraid of rejection." Jung believed that integrating the shadow doesn't mean acting out every repressed impulse. It means acknowledging these aspects of ourselves and finding healthy ways to express them. Sarah began setting boundaries at work. She started saying no to social obligations that drained her. Most importantly, she began expressing her authentic opinions, even when they might cause conflict. "The first time I disagreed with my boss in a meeting, my heart was pounding. But something amazing happened. He respected my perspective. My relationships became more genuine because people were finally meeting the real me, not just my persona." But here's what's most remarkable about Sarah's transformation. As she integrated her shadow, she didn't become harder or less caring. She became more genuinely kind because her kindness was now a choice rather than a compulsion. "Jung was right," Sarah wrote. The shadow contains not just our darkness, but our unrealized light. I discovered strength, creativity, and authenticity I never knew I had. Think about this in your own life. What qualities do you judge harshly in others? What aspects of yourself do you work hardest to hide? These might be clues to your own shadow material, waiting to be integrated and transformed into sources of power and authenticity. Marcus and the call to individuation. Our second story comes from Marcus, a 28-year-old teacher who experienced what Jung called the call to individuation, that inner urging to become who we truly are, separate from the expectations and projections of others. Marcus grew up in a family of lawyers. For as long as he could remember, it was assumed he would follow the same path. He excelled in school, got into a prestigious law program, and landed a position at a top firm. From the outside, Marcus had everything he was supposed to want. But inside, he felt hollow. I kept waiting to feel proud or fulfilled, but I just felt empty, Marcus shared. I was living someone else's dream, and I couldn't figure out why I was so miserable when I had everything I was supposed to want. Jung understood that many of us spend the first half of our lives meeting external expectations, what he called living from the ego's perspective. But there comes a point, often in our late 20s or 30s, when the soul begins to call us toward our authentic path. This call can be uncomfortable. It often means disappointing people we love, abandoning security, and facing the unknown. But Jung believed that ignoring this call leads to what he termed the unlived life, or existence of quiet desperation and growing resentment. For Marcus, the call came through his dreams and a growing sense of restlessness he couldn't shake. I kept having dreams about teaching children, about being in classrooms, about sharing knowledge in ways that felt alive and meaningful. I would wake up energized from these dreams, then drag myself to the law office. Jung placed great importance on dreams as messages from the unconscious mind. He saw them as guidance from the deeper self, pointing us toward our authentic path. Marcus began paying attention to these dreams. He also noticed what Jung called synchronicities, meaningful coincidences that seemed to guide him toward teaching. I kept running into former teachers who told me I should consider education. I kept finding myself in conversations about the importance of inspiring young minds. It was like the universe was trying to tell me something. The turning point came when Marcus realized he was living what Jung called the provisional life, always preparing to live rather than actually living. I was waiting for the right moment, for enough money saved, for my parents to understand. But Jung helped me see that the right moment is always now. We don't get practice runs at life. Making the transition wasn't easy. Marcus faced family disappointment, financial uncertainty, and moments of deep self-doubt. But he also discovered something profound. When we align with our authentic path, we tap into energy and passion we never knew we had. Teaching doesn't just feel like work, it feels like who I am. I'm using gifts I didn't even know I possessed. My relationships improved because I was no longer resentful about living someone else's life. Jung called this process individuation, the journey toward becoming our authentic selves, separate from the roles and expectations that others have placed on us. But here's what Marcus learned that many people miss. Individuation isn't selfish. When we become who we truly are, we serve the world in ways we never could when we were trying to be someone else. My students can feel that I'm genuinely passionate about what I'm teaching. My energy is contagious because it's authentic. I'm a better son, friend, and partner because I'm no longer carrying the resentment of an unlived life. What about you? What dreams or longings have you been dismissing as impractical? What would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? These questions point toward your own call to individuation, your invitation to become who you truly are. Elena's integration of opposites. Our final story comes from Elena, a 42-year-old artist who discovered one of Jung's most profound insights, the necessity of integrating our contradictions rather than trying to resolve them. Elena had always seen herself as a deeply spiritual person. She meditated daily, practiced yoga, read spiritual texts, and prided herself on her peaceful, centered approach to life. But Elena had a secret. She also struggled with intense anger, fierce ambition, and what she called unspiritual desires for recognition and success. I felt like a fraud, Elena wrote. Here I was, teaching meditation classes and talking about inner peace, while inside I was battling these dark emotions that felt completely at odds with my spiritual identity. Jung understood something that many spiritual traditions miss. Wholeness doesn't come from transcending our contradictions, but from integrating them. He believed that every psychological extreme contains its opposite, and that trying to be purely good, purely spiritual, or purely anything creates what he called one-sidedness, a psychological imbalance that eventually demands correction. Elena's breakthrough came when she stopped trying to eliminate her unspiritual qualities and started exploring what they were trying to tell her. I realized my anger wasn't evil. It was pointing toward boundaries I needed to set and injustices I needed to address. My ambition wasn't shallow. It was connected to a deep desire to share my gifts with the world. Jung introduced the concept he called the union of opposites, the idea that our greatest strength often lies in our ability to hold contradictory truths simultaneously. Elena began what she calls conscious contradiction, acknowledging and expressing different aspects of herself in appropriate contexts. I could be fiercely protective of my values while also being compassionate toward those who disagreed with me. I could be ambitious about my art while also being genuinely spiritual. I could feel anger and peace in the same day, sometimes in the same moment. This integration transformed Elena's spiritual practice from something she used to escape her humanity into something that embraced her full human experience. My meditation became more honest. Instead of trying to transcend my emotions, I started meeting them with awareness. My art became more powerful because it came from my whole self, not just the parts one thought were acceptable. But the most profound change was in Elena's relationships. When she stopped pretending to be one-dimensional, others felt permission to be complex too. My marriage deepened because my husband could finally relate to a real person instead of a spiritual persona. My friendships became more authentic because I wasn't constantly managing my image. Jung believed that this integration of opposites is essential for what he called psychological maturity. It's the difference between being good and being whole. Elena's story reveals something crucial. The goal isn't to be perfect, but to be complete. It's not about eliminating our contradictions, but about finding creative ways to honor all aspects of who we are. I'm no longer trying to be the perfect spiritual person, Elena concluded. I'm trying to be a whole human being. And somehow, that's actually more spiritual than anything I was doing before. What contradictions are you trying to resolve in your own life? What if, instead of choosing sides, you found ways to honor both aspects of who you are? Your journey begins now. These 3 stories reveal something profound about Jung's approach to transformation. It's not about becoming someone new, but about becoming who you've always been underneath the layers of conditioning, expectation, and fear. Sarah discovered that her shadow contained not just her repressed anger, but her authentic power. Marcus learned that following his individual path served not just himself, but everyone his authentic gifts could touch. Elena found that embracing her contradictions made her more whole, not more fragmented. But here's what I want you to understand. These transformations didn't happen overnight. They required what Jung called the courage to be disliked, the willingness to disappoint others in service of becoming authentic. They also required what might be the most difficult thing of all, self-compassion. Jung understood that we can't integrate what we judge, we can't heal what we hate, and we can't become whole while rejecting parts of ourselves. Each of these individuals had to develop a new relationship with their inner critic, learning to observe their thoughts and patterns with curiosity rather than judgment. So where do you begin your own journey of individuation? Start by paying attention to your reactions. What triggers you? What do you judge in others? These are often clues to your own shadow material. Notice your dreams and synchronicities. Jung believed the unconscious is constantly trying to guide us toward wholeness if we are willing to listen. Ask yourself the hard questions. What life are you living that isn't truly yours? What contradictions are you trying to resolve instead of integrate? What aspects of yourself are you rejecting in the name of being good or acceptable? Remember, Jung's goal wasn't happiness, it was wholeness. And sometimes, the path to wholeness requires us to feel our pain, face our fears, and embrace our complexity. But here's the promise. On the other side of this honest self-examination lies a life of authenticity, purpose, and genuine connection that you might not have even known was possible. Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is being who you are." Sarah, Marcus, and Elena discovered this privilege by having the courage to face themselves honestly, to integrate their rejected aspects, and to choose authenticity over approval. Their stories remind us that transformation isn't about perfection, it's about wholeness. It's not about eliminating our contradictions, but about finding creative ways to honor all aspects of who we are. The question isn't whether you have a shadow, or whether you're living someone else's life, or whether you have contradictions to integrate. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Your unconscious is speaking to you right now through your reactions, your dreams, your longings, and your resistances. The only question is whether you're ready to listen. If these stories have touched something in you, I want you to do something brave. I want you to share one insight about yourself in the comments below. It doesn't have to be profound or complete, just honest. What pattern are you ready to examine? What dream have you been ignoring? What aspect of yourself are you ready to integrate? Your story of transformation might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to begin their own journey toward wholeness. And if you found value in these stories, please share this video with someone who might need to hear them. Jung's insights have the power to transform lives, but only if we are brave enough to apply them. Subscribe for more content on psychology, self-development, and the journey toward authentic living. Because the world needs more people who have the courage to be who they truly are. Remember, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. But once you do the work, once you face yourself honestly and integrate all aspects of who you are, you discover something remarkable. What you thought was fate was actually choice. And that changes everything. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next video.